Yes, my name is Lana. I am an instructor and education manager with the Bike to Work Society of Greater Victoria. This is my 6th season. Normally, we would be out on days like this, outside teaching skills and practicing skills. But now we have gone digital, and this is our 3rd webinar. So that's pretty exciting. Just a little bit about myself. I started teaching skills because I love riding my bike. I love the feeling of freedom that it gives me, getting places under my own steam and feeling pretty much like I did when I was a kid riding my bike. And I love teaching bike skills to people because it's a great feeling to share those same skills and give people the confidence and the knowledge to ride safely on our roads and trails. So today we're going to be talking about the rules of the road for people on bikes and other tips for safe riding. And I will also include that our provincial health officers have been saying that people who are commuting to work should look at alternate ways of getting there during the coronavirus pandemic, such as cycling, walking, or running. So it's perfect timing for a webinar such as this. And we are going to start with a quiz. Pop quiz, everybody. I hope you're ready. So we just have 3 quick questions, true or false. First question, I think you can see it. A person riding a bike has the same rights and duties as driver of a vehicle. 100% true. Okay. Second question. Is it up? A cycle is a vehicle according to the MBA. Okay, most people have said true. And third question, last question. A cyclist may ride on a sidewalk. True or false? Okay, almost again, everybody has said false. So, answers. First question is true. A person riding a bike has the same rights and duties as a driver of a vehicle. The rule says that in addition to the duties imposed by this section, a person operating a cycle on a highway has the same duties as a driver, rights and duties as a driver of a vehicle. So stop signs, red lights, one-way streets, those all apply to people on bikes. Second question, a cycle is a vehicle according to the MBA. False. The definition of vehicle specifically excludes, and I quote, a device designed to be moved by human power. So, although people have the same rights and duties as vehicle drivers when they're riding a bike, a bicycle is not a vehicle according to the Act, and that can be confusing when trying to interpret some of the Motor Vehicle Act in respect of cyclists, which we'll talk about. Number 3, a cyclist may ride on a sidewalk. And again, that is, that is false. According to the rule, a person operating a cycle must not ride on the sidewalk. I'm trying to see my notes. Unless authorized by municipal bylaw or unless otherwise directed by a sign. And this rule goes back to 1913 when cyclists were banned from provincial sidewalks, but they were not given corresponding legislative status as vehicles. Another fun fact, the earliest Canadian laws about bikes date way back to the late 1800s when there were mostly horsemen and carriages on the roadways. And these rules, which are still around today, require cyclists to stay to the right and to use a bell or a lamp at night. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. What is the MBA? The law governing bicycles in British Columbia is the Motor Vehicle Act, and most of these laws are contained in Part 3, Section 183, Rights and Duties of Operator of a Cycle. Many of these laws and rules are straightforward, easily understood. We'll review those. Some of the rules, less so. They require interpretation to apply them, and we're going to take a closer look at some of those rules from the perspective of cycling safety. And then lastly, today, we're going to look at cycling-specific infrastructure and how to use it. The Motor Vehicle Act, which was passed in the mid-1950s, has changed quite little since then, and so cycling-specific infrastructure is not dealt with in the Motor Vehicle Act. As we proceed and review the rules of the road for cyclists, what I want you to think about is not simply whether is it legal, but also, is it safe for me to do this? Am I visible when I do this? Am I visible to other road users? And also, can I anticipate? Can I anticipate what might happen in the next 30 seconds? And also importantly, can other road users anticipate what I might do? Am I being predictable? The single most important rule as a cyclist is to remember to be alert and to be prepared for unpredictable moves or mistakes by others. So let's start at the beginning with safety equipment. The Motor Vehicle Act does require a cyclist to have lights, a front white light, a rear red light, and a reflector. It actually requires a reflector. Many bike lights can be, they function as both a red light and a reflector, and many bikes actually come with reflectors installed, so we don't often think about that. The Act also requires that the lights be on during dusk, dawn, and at night, so a half an hour after sunset all the way through to a half an hour before sunrise. But here's the safety tip. Use your lights day and night. Daytime running lights, just as with a vehicle, make a cyclist safer because you're more visible. In fact, the evidence shows that they reduce the risk of being hit by 47%. The most common comment made by a driver in vehicle-cyclist collisions is, I didn't see them. And the next most common is, I couldn't see them. So let's go on to other equipment. Brakes. A bike must be equipped with at least one brake that works, just like your car, if you have a car. And thirdly, helmets. And again, this is provincial legislation. So in BC, all cyclists at all ages are required to wear an approved helmet according to Section 184. It has its own section, not Section 183. So it needs to be certified as a bike helmet. And if you look inside, you can see certification indicating it's for cycling. Some helmets, like this helmet here, may be very similar looking to a snow sport helmet, which is constructed differently. And as I mentioned, it does come under provincial jurisdiction, so helmet laws can vary from province to province. If you're going on a trip on your bike and you ride over to Alberta, or as far as Manitoba, that would require minors up to the age of 18, and then it's discretionary after that. If you're riding over in the Atlantic provinces, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador, that is also all ages. So it does vary across the country. And then there are many rules stating what a cyclist must not do. Must not, as we know, ride on a sidewalk unless authorized by a municipal bylaw or directed by a specific sign. So some examples, Maple Ridge and New Westminster do have some provisions for sidewalk riding. And why not? It's more dangerous for both pedestrians and cyclists for a cyclist to ride on a sidewalk. They have features, street furniture, posts, uneven paving, pets, all that can be obstacles that can be hit by cyclists, and drivers do not expect cyclists to enter the roadway from a sidewalk. That is an intersection. Riding on a crosswalk unless authorized by a municipal bylaw or directed by a sign, and we will talk about some of these exceptions as we go on. What else? You must not ride your bike on a highway where a sign prohibits it. And riding two abreast, again, provincial law, that can be different in other places. And that is on roadways. We will talk about multi-use trails, which are different. No doubling unless the bike is designed to carry more than one person. A tandem bike, a cargo bike built with a child seat, or an approved child seat attached to a regular bike. And then there are laws as for drivers that you must not operate your bicycle without due care and attention or without reasonable consideration for other persons using the highway. So headphones, earbuds, we generally say one or none. You need to not be distracted. And checking your phone or texting can also be interpreted by law enforcement as not riding with due care and attention. And that great skill, riding with no hands, is prohibited by law. Some of these things look kind of fun, and maybe we want to all move our bikes over to Amsterdam. But no, these are laws in British Columbia. There's also a law about attaching to a vehicle and catching a ride. Quite dangerous. I didn't even bother to insert a photo for that. Moving on to hand signals, communicating and being predictable. A cyclist must signify their intended actions with a signal to show that you're turning left, extending your left arm and hand out horizontally, essentially pointing in the direction you intend to turn. A right turn signal, there are two options. One, again, is to extend your right arm and hand out to the right, or you can extend your left arm and hand up to make a right angle. And also, by law, a cyclist is required to show that they are slowing or stopping, extending your left hand and arm out and down. Very important to note here, if you find yourself in a position where you need to make an emergency stop, keeping both hands on your handlebars will be safer, allow you to better control your bike. This is something where you might want to use your voice or just keep your own personal safety paramount. So, having reviewed many of the rules that apply to people on bikes, let's take a closer look at one of the rules that a cyclist must always be considering when they're riding. One that has been the source of much debate amongst cyclists and drivers alike, which is where a cyclist should position their self on the road. And so this is section 183, subsection 2, subsection C. A person operating a cycle must ride as near as practicable to the right side of the highway. And we have another poll that we're going to open here, which is, do you think practicable means the same thing as possible? That a cyclist should ride as close as possible to the curb? In other words, when you ride, do you hug the curb or do you leave some space, a little wiggle room? Where do you position your bike? And 100% say no, it does not mean the same thing as possible. Well done, everyone. The word practicable requires interpretation, and it is commonly understood to be what is reasonable and safe. But what is reasonable and safe also requires interpretation. So, by and large, best cycling practices recommend that what is reasonable and safe is approximately 1 meter from the curb. Why? Keeping a distance from the road edge or curb helps to avoid debris, road surface conditions that are deteriorating, or just existing drainage rates that may cause a cyclist to lose control. If there's broken glass, it's all going to get swept up on the edge. Debris, potholes with leaves, you don't know how deep it is. So keeping a distance allows you to move away from rather than into traffic in the event of an emergency maneuver. So again, a safety tip, always be alert and prepared for the unpredictable moves or mistakes by others, and anticipate, scan the road in front of you so that you can minimize emergency maneuvers. So the previous image showed a cyclist riding alongside a curb, but in many cases there's on-street parking. And now what is reasonable and safe from the right side of the road when there's on-street parking? The curb is on the other side of these cars. So when you're riding alongside parked cars, very, very important to stay out of the door zone. Don't ride here. This 3 to 4 feet next to parked cars on the side of the road. It's a very serious hazard for cyclists should a driver not notice the cyclist coming up and open the door. So in this case, you want to increase your distance away from parked cars to about 1.5 meters, about 5 feet. Imagine all the doors are open and you give yourself another 30 centimeters or 1 foot clearance to avoid the dreaded door cracks. And of course, there's other hazards that can happen around parked cars, not just doors opening, people darting out, small children, cars starting to leave their parking spot without adequately shoulder checking. So staying out of the door zone, increase your distance. Here is another scenario where we have on-street parking, but irregularly spaced parked cars. And we can see there are two options for a cyclist. One is to maintain this position of staying out of the door zone and not going in towards the curb when there's a space. That's cyclist B. Or cyclist A, there's some space, get closer to the curb. And I also want you to note the position of the cars that are coming behind the cyclist. And then I have a question. Which cyclist is in the safer position? A, who goes in towards the curb, swerves in towards the curb, then comes back out when there's a car parked in front of them, or B, the cyclist who maintains their position. Okay, most everybody is agreeing, ding, 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 that cyclist B is the safer cyclist. They're maintaining their position, their lane position to the left of parked cars out of the door zone. It allows them to stay, why is this, in the natural sight lines of the vehicular traffic coming behind them in the same direction. Also, by maintaining their position and riding in a straight line, the cyclist is more predictable for other road users, which is safer. Why is cyclist A less safe? So vehicles coming from behind may not see cyclist A when they swerve into the lane. This cyclist may not, or this driver may not see cyclist A up here when they go in. And cyclist A is less predictable. Vehicle coming from behind may think that in fact cyclist A is swerving in because they're pulling over and that's their destination, and not expect them to swerve back into traffic. By rights, this cyclist should be shoulder checking and yielding to come back into the lane that they've left. So another note here, if there's a big gap in parked cars and you feel like you're not traveling the speed of the traffic, you feel like you're holding up traffic, you can move over to the curb for sure, but shoulder check, signal first, you're changing lanes, and when you want to come back out, shoulder check and see that it's safe, that there's not a car in the lane and you have to yield to them. So shoulder check and signal in that situation. So now, what about a vehicle that is passing me when I'm riding my bike? What about safe distances required by vehicles overtaking? The Motor Vehicle Act requires an overtaking vehicle to, quote, pass to the left of the other vehicle at a safe distance. But remember, bicycles are not considered vehicles under the Act. So does it apply to passing a cyclist? However, cyclists do have the same rights as the operator of a vehicle. So it's arguable that a cyclist has the right to be passed at a safe distance. The Motor Vehicle Act does not define a minimum safe passing distance for motorists overtaking cyclists. This is a kind of law that other jurisdictions have passed, safe passing law. The province of Ontario has passed such a law, the city of Calgary, 33 states in the US. I will note that in the ICBC driving manual, it advises drivers to share the road, and specifically when passing a cyclist to allow plenty of following distance behind a cyclist to make sure there is enough space to pass a cyclist, and on a multi-lane road to change lanes rather than risk crowding the cyclist. But it's not specified in law that there should be at least a meter, and this image is taken from that manual. So an important note here, if you have a regular driving route and sometimes you're riding it or you're starting to ride it, it may not be the best cycling route. What you would want to do is consider more bike-friendly roads and trails that are less busy with road traffic, lower speeds, and take some time to plan that route. Okay, so this brings us to taking the lane. Sometimes the center of the lane can be safer for bicycles. When would you want to take the lane? A couple of circumstances. When the lane is not wide enough for a motorist to pass you safely. So generally, if the right wheel track of most vehicle traffic is less than 1 meter from the curb or on-street parking. Another situation is when you're traveling at the same speed as traffic. So downtown, start and stop traffic where there's lights at every block, or if you're riding an e-bike, which often can travel at the same speed of traffic. Why might this center of the lane be safer? Well, it discourages drivers from trying to squeeze by when there isn't sufficient room. And riding in the primary position, as it's sometimes called, keeps you out of motorists' blind spot. So it reduces conflict with, and it also reduces conflict with right turning vehicles who may not see a cyclist to the right. So signage like this, bicycles may use full lane, may be there, it may not be there. So it's helpful when it's there, but it can also be problematic because it can cause a motorist to think that these signs indicate a black and white situation, that only when those signs are there, and that is not the case. Another important note, while it may be safer to take the lane in these circumstances, there is still, I underline, no concrete legal definition of what as near as practicable to the right side of the road means. It's possible that a police or bylaw officer could issue you a warning or a ticket for not riding on the right side of the road. So in this same vein of thought, we're going to continue on looking at types of cycling infrastructure that helps to facilitate safe cycling. This is done by municipalities, helps to encourage cyclists to be on the road and show them where to safely be. So to encourage the safe practices that we've just been talking about in terms of a position that a cyclist can take. So Sharrows, if you've heard of Sharrows or seen them, it's these painted markings. They're called shared use markings. Sharrow is a combined shared arrow. These two chevrons here and the cyclist icon, they are placed on road surfaces to, quote, indicate to both cyclists and drivers of the correct cycling positioning in the lane. And the purpose is to facilitate, as I said, and encourage cyclist use on roadways where it may not be possible to install bike lanes. So this picture, I just took a screenshot of Royal Oak in Saanich, a route I frequently find myself on, where just before the Sharrow is a bike lane, and then the road narrows. The bike lane is gone, no room for it. The Sharrow appears if you continue down, cross the Pat Bay Highway, and on the other side of that intersection, that long intersection overpass, the bike lane starts up again. So two types of Sharrows. One is the side-by-side. This is for use on lanes which are wide enough for cyclists and vehicles, but not for the bike lane. So the bike lane disappears. It's widowed. And then you may or may not see this type of sign. It may be there, it's not here on the Royal Oak. There's another type of Sharrow situation or application, which is called the single file, for use on lanes which are too narrow for the cyclist and the vehicle to be side by side. So the marking is in the center of the lane. So of course, this is the cyclist taking the lane, the Sharrow indicating where the cyclist should be traveling, and the sign that may or may not be present showing single file, car and cyclist sharing the lane. And conflict paint, I actually like to call this caution paint. You may have noticed in town a lot of green paint in the last few years. Municipalities use this green paint to signify shared areas where motorists and cyclists need to pay the most attention to one another. So the left image here, our cycling instructor Bronwyn is riding on, this is Pandora, might be 4th Street. You can correct me. But the green paint is at an intersection. So these bike lanes are often using conflict paint at intersections and driveways. And the right one is a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more dicey. Again, this is a regular route of mine. It's on Saanich Road, heading towards Uptown. And you can see the bike lane with the conflict paint is to the left of the special use lane, a bus lane. And as well, there's dotted lines on either side, indicating that this is a place where a vehicle can enter into that bike lane if they are, as this car might do, turn, or should have done here, cross the lane to get into the turning lane to enter the Uptown complex. Green paint to signify much attention is required of both cyclists and vehicles using that space. Moving on to a bike box, most of them have green paint. Well, all of them in our area have green paint. Some regions use red paint or blue paint, it's in Vancouver. And a bike box, I love bike boxes. They are a designated area at the front of a traffic queue at a signalized intersection that provides cyclists a safe and visible space to wait when the light is red. So in this case, or in the case of a bike box, the stop bar gets further back for vehicles, and vehicles are to stop back here. It's really important that vehicles understand how they work and stop behind the stop bar rather than right into the paint. The benefits when it's working and vehicles are stopped is it allows for easier intersection crossing on high volume cycling routes where cyclists must cross high vehicle traffic intersections. It increases the visibility of cyclists. They're all at the front. It facilitates cyclists turning positions at intersections. So a cyclist turning left can go to the left side of the road. Cyclists going forward can go in the middle, and a cyclist turning right could just stay over on the right here with cars queuing behind. It also groups cyclists together to clear an intersection quickly, minimizing the impediment to transit or other traffic. And a little bit about two-way bike lanes infrastructure. So since 2017, Victoria has been constructing protected two-way bike lanes. First was Pandora, and then 4th Street. Most recently, we have Wharf and Humboldt. These are all ages and abilities, or AAA facilities, and the bike lanes are separated from the roadway either by a raised curb or with a, if there's not a curb, you will see a painted buffer and bollards spaced alongside, separating traffic physically from cyclists. There are things to watch for on the two-stage bike lanes. The bicycle-specific lights. On Pandora, for example, even though you have a bike-specific light, it's not in sync with vehicle lights necessarily, but you would want to watch for right-hand turning vehicles, even though they're not allowed to turn right on a red on Pandora. Watch out for high congestion on bike lanes. Again, green conflict paint at intersections and driveway entrances. There are raised mid-block crosswalks for pedestrians who may or may not use them at mid-block, who may or may not watch for cyclists. So control your speed, pay attention. Specifically on the Wharf and Humboldt bike lanes, there are tight corners to watch for. And two-stage turn cue boxes, that's a mouthful, at intersections to help make turns onto and off of Pandora and Fort two-way bike lanes. And I'm going to give a little brief tutorial on how to use two-stage turns with a bike box. They're called bike turn boxes. If you've used them before, that's great. I do see a lot of people that aren't using them. There are also helpful videos on the City of Victoria's website. Look for the cycling tab and then click on Pandora Avenue. It's the only place where they've actually have these videos. So very quickly, the idea of the two-stage turn is to make two turns and avoid or minimize turning across traffic. It can take longer because of waiting for lights, but it's very safe. So looking at an example of wanting to ultimately turn right off of the bike lane, what you would do is your first turn would be left, signal a left turn. When the light is green for you to go forward, you signal, you turn left, do a little U-turn into the bike box, and then position yourself to go straight through and wait for the light, cursor, to travel in your intended direction. So a left turn and then straight through to make what is ultimately a right-hand turn. Another example. So you're traveling west along the bike lane and ultimately you want to turn left off of the bike lane. You would wait for your green light, signal your intention to turn right. You're not turning right on the road, you're going through and turning right into the bike box, do a little U-turn, position yourself to go straight through the intersection when the light is green, travel through. So stage one, stage two. These work really well because the bike box is the width of the lane. This situation, this is entering the two-way bike lane where you want to turn left. You would wait at the light. When the light turns, even though this traffic is one way in this direction, indicate your right-hand turn, carefully get into the bike lane. It's going to be a tight turn and quite difficult, if not impossible, if you have a bike trailer. Orient yourself, wait for the green light, the green bike light, and then proceed straight through. That is how the city recommends using bike turn boxes to get on and off. There are other examples, these are just a few. If you were turning right to leave this bike lane, you would just do a simple standard right-hand turn. So you don't always use the two-stage turn. Okay, elephant's feet crosswalks. It's a funny name, but it's actually really important infrastructure for cyclists. So remember the rule prohibiting a cyclist from riding on a crosswalk unless a municipality implements a bylaw permitting it. So there's another way to get around that and permit a cyclist to ride on a crosswalk. When a municipality paints these dots, they're actually squares that only kind of look like elephant's feet, parallel to crosswalk markings, it means that a cyclist does not need to dismount as they would at a regular crosswalk. Cyclists should always yield to pedestrians, slow down, only cross when it's safe. Locally, elephant's feet are mostly found on our bike paths and multi-use trails. And I want to point out that sometimes peace officers are unaware of the rules around cycling infrastructure. So this image was actually tweeted by an RCMP traffic services account with a misleading message saying, this actual image, never ride across, the right thing to do is to walk. That same image with the elephant's feet, and their account was updated when people pointed out that no, those are elephant's feet, you can do this, you can ride across them. So not everybody knows how the infrastructure works, what it's intended to do. Very quickly, multi-use trails. many types of users doing different activities on multi-use trails. Walkers, this person has limited vision, walking with a cane. There are dogs on retractable leashes that are hard to see sometimes, people on skateboards, people running, kids learning to ride a bike, toddlers darting about. It's very important to be courteous to other trail users and follow the CRD's multi-use trail rules, which I will outline very quickly. All trail users stay to the right, except to pass. Stay to the right of your lane. Cyclists are to yield to all trail users. And in fact, all trail users are to yield to horses, including cyclists. Use a bell or your voice to alert others before passing. Slow down. Make sure there's enough room to pass. Slow down at intersections and check signs before crossing when it's safe. And yes, watch for all sorts of obstacles on the trail. There is a short video put out by the CRD, and we will send that link out along with other links I've mentioned in a follow-up email. And I just wanted to follow up about multi-use trails and intersections that regarding crossing them. Cyclists do not automatically have the right of way at intersections. Check the signs. Sometimes the multi-use trail has stop signs and road traffic has the right of way. In other cases, it's vice versa. But it's important to know that cyclists are not required to walk their bike on the crosswalk along our regional multi-use trails, at least not in Saanich or Victoria. Both Saanich and Victoria's bylaws do state, this is the Saanich one, notwithstanding section 183 of the Motor Vehicle Act or any successor provision, a person may ride a cycle in any crosswalk which forms a direct and immediate link between adjacent portions of the Galloping Goose Trail, the Lochside Trail, a Centennial Trail, or any other multi-use trail. And Victoria's bylaws are similar. This photo shows the Galloping Goose and the intersection at Harbour Road looking north. You can see that there's a stop sign for traffic. And I point this one out because I do know of people who have been stopped for not walking their bike. And again, it just may be that people don't know all the rules. People make mistakes. That is all I have to say in this presentation. There's lots more that you can talk about in the law, so you can, I hope there's questions. But I just wanted to talk about what is coming up next with the Bike to Work Society. On Friday, June 5th, there is going to be a webinar on e-bikes. I actually had a slide for e-bikes, but found out that our great instructor Todd is doing a webinar at 11 o'clock. Ongoing activities, this is really cool and exciting and fun. There are neighborhood scavenger hunts with about 10 to 15 clues. They're all over the neighborhoods. They're coming out every 2 weeks around the region. There are discovery rides, which are, I don't know, they're maybe 15 to 20 kilometers. They invite you to explore points of interest in the ride package. And then there are longer rides for experienced cyclists looking for longer challenges. And they can be as far as 25 to over 100 kilometers. Every 2 weeks, there are new routes being released for the different neighborhoods. There are details online. Justine will send you links. There's downloadable Google Maps for each route, prizes to be won, and don't delay because there are deadlines for submitting your entries. And that is about all. We're open for questions now. Can you hear me, Justine?
Yeah, thanks so much, Lana. That was a great presentation. So far we have a few questions. Folks, just because we started a bit later, I think if you do have questions, we'll go a little past noon. But also understandable if there is conflict and you need to leave early. Thank you so much for joining us. First question is from Teresa, and that is, what is the proper use of flashing white lights? I use them during the day because I find they give me a headache at night, but I see lots of people using them as their only light source in the dark.
Great question, Teresa, and thank you for that. So flashing white lights on your bike, there's no prescribed rules. I would say there are camps of people's opinions regarding how to use your lights. I'm definitely in camp solid white lights. Flashing white lights are more recommended during the daytime as you're running lights, and it's just your choice. Again, I underline the need for courtesy and respect of road users, and that lights can be extremely bright. So for example, if you're on a trail or a quiet road at night or a pathway, I try to, if there is a pedestrian or cyclist oncoming, I will actually put my hand over my light or angle my light a bit down so that I'm not blinding them. So flashing lights during the day, better certainly than flashing lights at night. Some people, again, it's just camps. Some people have a solid white light, and then they have a secondary, probably smaller, flashing white light. But it's all what you prefer.
Thanks. This question's from Donna. Are cyclists allowed to ride side by side in a bike lane?
Not in a bike lane, not on the road. So, great question though. If you were on a trail, multi-use trail, which is not a road, you can ride side by side. Again, the importance is to be courteous, and as soon as you see you're overtaking or there's other people coming, you'd want to quickly go back into single file.
Thanks, Lana. We have 2 comments regarding one of the photos in the slideshow, and that was of Patty signaling stop. Is there a wrong hand or wrong hand to signal to stop? Because Patty was using her right arm instead of her left arm.
Oh, good point. Somebody gets bonus points. It is the left hand. So if that's either that photo has been flipped and she is actually using her correct hand, or Patty's using her wrong hand. It is the left hand should be down, out, and down. So who said that?
Teresa and Catherine both caught that.
Good eyes, Teresa and Catherine. I have seen those photos many times and never actually noticed that. So I will correct the photos, or if the photo is flipped, I'll correct it. Otherwise, we'll update the photo. So thank you for noticing.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Is there a rule or law regarding horses on the Galloping Goose and Lochside to stay to one side of the trails? Years ago, horses used to stay to one side of the Lochside Trail. Now horses are all over the trail. It has become a minefield to navigate this trail on a bike. At night, a rider could ride through a pile of horse droppings and fall off their bike. And that's also Donna.
Donna, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that, whether horses, I would think horses are, if we go back to the rules that all trail users should ride to the right, that would include horses, that they're trail users. We do know that all trail users yield to horses, but I would think trail users include horses, so they should be on the right. And of course, there's only certain parts of trails that horses are allowed on, thinking about Elk Lake, but I don't know the details of, you know, where exactly they're allowed and not, given that I don't own or ride a horse on the trails.
This question's from Carolyn. She asks, can you explain the use of green paint as caution when usually it would be orange for any other use, including the road? I thought the green was a safe zone for cyclists.
Well, can I explain it? No, why they chose that color. As I said, I've seen images of bike boxes that are painted red. I've seen images of bike boxes painted blue. So the choice of color would be by the transportation or engineering department of a municipality. I'm not sure why it is green. And as a safe zone, the idea is to keep it safe by drawing users' attention, vehicles and cars, that, as I said, the paint would be put on intersections, on driveways where the bike lanes are. The image that I showed on Saanich Road, where vehicles are allowed to turn through the bike lane in order to make a right-hand turn. Not designed as safe, but designed to keep it safe by bringing attention to that area or calling users to pay very close attention to where the green paint is.
Thanks, Lana. I have one more question from Sabrina. Is the new Dallas Road Path considered a multi-use path?
I wish I knew. I haven't actually been on it. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I'm thinking probably a bike lane.
I've ridden on it, and I've seen pedestrians on it. I'm not sure what its like official designation is, so.
Okay, well, if you've ridden on it, I'm assuming that maybe it is a multi-use path. Yeah, I've been sticking to my own neighborhood, and I haven't been down there.
Another question from Sabrina. Oh, this is a follow-up, I guess. The Dallas Road Path has speed bumps, so I assume it's good for cycling.
Yeah. Good to know.
I guess my question, Lana, is there a legal situation where I can pass on the right as a cyclist?
That's a great question, Justine. And that was one area that I wanted to talk about. And just for time issues, I didn't bring it up. Passing on the right is okay if you're in a bike lane and if the vehicle to your left is turning left or indicating that they're turning left. Passing on the right can be quite dangerous, so you must not pass on the right if traffic is moving, and if there is a street or a driveway or a parking spot that a car might be turning into, and if there is not enough space, so if there is not an unobstructed lane, so if there's less than 1.5 meters between the traffic to your left and a curb.
I have one more.
Is there another question?
This is just a follow-up, I think, about the Dallas Road Path from Caroline. And she says, it will be a multi-use path later in June.
Okay, great. And so I do have this slide here about fines, which I didn't want to dwell on, and I thought a question may come up. So there are fines for all these rules that I went through, and you know, there's the ticketed amount, which is pretty much just the same as what a vehicle driver could receive. You know, if they don't pay it right away, $109. Helmet laws are $29, and most often a officer will issue warnings, but you can be ticketed for these offenses. I wanted to address that if that came up. And I also would like to just underscore that and emphasize that I'm not critical of peace officers enforcing laws applying to our cyclists, but I did want to note that mistakes can happen. For example, with the Elephant's Feet crosswalk, with cyclists not needing to walk their bike across the crosswalk where it's the multi-use trails and that people have been stopped. Mistakes happen. Cyclists do a lot of things that are wrong. We all make mistakes, and that we're all trying to do our best to keep the roads and each other safe. So I like to end by saying, be safe, be patient, and be kind, just like this cyclist is doing.
I think that's a great place to stop this.
Yeah. And then if people have questions that they haven't thought of now, they can certainly direct them to Justine, and I'd be more than happy to answer them and follow up.
All right. Thank you so much, Lana. Thank you, folks, all for joining us in today's webinar. Just a reminder that next Friday we have a webinar on e-bikes, and that'll include a recorded conversation with Todd, our cycling instructor, and Heidi Ulrich from Oak Bay Bikes. So some local celebrities.
Awesome.
And then also, I will be following up with an email with all the resources that Lana mentioned. And as well, I encourage everyone to check out our resource library on our website under the cycling infrastructure in the CRD. Also has a lot of information that Lana covered in this webinar. Also, feel free to fill out our our survey that will pop up once you quit the webinar. We'd really appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.